I'm going to rank all 21 gaming laptops I tested this year from best to worst with this tier list. The way it works is simple. There are 7 different tiers, with F down the bottom being the worst and S up the top being the best. But what does S even mean? Well, according to the famous historian Wikipedia, S stands for superb or superior. Basically, it's the best. I've got all laptops tested on the right-hand side in alphabetical order. I can only fit 15 at a time, but don't worry, all 21 are there. All of these laptops want a piece of that S tier action, and there's been some tough competition this year. So let's find out which of these models make the cut and where everything else ends up. And if you are looking for a new gaming laptop, you can save the most amount of money with my gaminglaptop.deals website. We update it every day to share the best sales. So check it out regularly with that link below. Alright, just some quick disclaimers before we begin. This video is not sponsored by anyone. All these thoughts and opinions are based on my own personal experience reviewing these laptops throughout the year. And I'm not saying that anything I put in S tier is perfect. Nothing in life is perfect. There are always going to be trade-offs. When it comes to gaming laptops, it's about finding something that has the least amount of compromises for you. Something that works amazingly for you might be complete garbage for someone else. That's just the way it is. Everyone's got different requirements. So obviously, as a result, all of my rankings are going to be biased based on my own personal experience and what I think is good in a laptop. So if I rank something low, it doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't buy it. And if I say that your laptop sucks, just relax. These are just my thoughts and opinions. They can't hurt you. Alright, let's go. Alright, first up we've got ASUS Helios Neo 16. And ASUS Helios series tends to be a more expensive option, even this Neo version, which is meant to be a lower tier below the standard Helios. It still ends up quite pricey. Now last year I put the Helios Neo 16 in C tier, but there have actually been some nice improvements to it this year, including a newer, faster CPU, faster RAM, faster screen with better color gamut, an upgrade to Ethernet and Wi-Fi, and even quieter fans, which is certainly welcome because ASUS laptops in the past have been some of the loudest. The main downside to the Helios Neo 16 was it was the heaviest 16-inch gaming laptop that we tested all year, and battery life is also worse compared to most others. And I think that combination just means there's less overall portability. It's harder to take places, and when you do take it places, it doesn't last as long. Not to mention that for some reason the Type-C charging is limited to just 65 watts. Most laptops have at least 100 watts. Overall, it is a really nice gaming laptop. I mean, I did mention it in my top 5 best gaming laptops of the year. So if last year's was C, this is at least gotta be B tier. Yeah, it would definitely be A tier, but for me personally, the extra weight and poor battery life just take away from the things that make it a portable gaming laptop, and that's something that I personally care about. If you don't mind that as much, it could totally be A tier, but for now, we'll leave it in B and move on. Alright, next up we've got Alienware's M16R2. And like the Helios Neo 16, this tends to be a more expensive gaming laptop, but that's also just kind of the Alienware way. They sell overpriced machines. Though this has had some okay sales recently, coming down to $12.99 with the RTX 4070. Basically, this is the entry level to the Alienware brand at the moment, but it kind of just feels a bit like a reskinned Dell G16, just with a slightly nicer chassis, but it doesn't even have Alienware's classic RGB ring on the back. So how are you supposed to actually know that it's an Alienware laptop? There's just nothing in particular that this laptop really shines at. It's a solid fine. And yeah, it's hard to justify compared to alternatives that are going to cost less money, like Lenovo's Legion series, which also have a better touchpad, more powerful CPU, less screen wobble, and a brighter screen. So yeah, for now I think I'm going to put this below the Helios Neo 16 in C tier. Again, it's a solid fine. It's not really something I'd go out of my way and purchase or really recommend over others, but it's okay with a good sale. Alright, next up we've got Alienware's M18R2, which is currently their most powerful gaming laptop. Now, I know I just said Alienware gaming laptops are typically overpriced, and that has been the case with the M18 as well. But over the last few months, we've had some pretty good sales on this laptop on the gaminglaptop.deals website. We're talking about like $2,070 for the RTX 4080 version. And keep in mind that generally when you get a bigger gaming laptop like this, it's usually going to cost more money compared to a 16-inch model. And yeah, that price is lower than we've seen some 16-inch 4080 laptops. So not bad at all if you do want the bigger screen. And this just makes it a cheaper option compared to competitors like ASUS's Scar 18, Razer's Blade 18, or MSI's Titan 18. Unfortunately, there's no mini LED screen option with the Alienware M18 like some others do, like ASUS's Scar or Acer's Helios 18, so it doesn't get quite as bright. And actually, the screen overall with the M18 just isn't that impressive considering it's meant to be Alienware's best option. It's also the heaviest 18-inch gaming laptop we've tested all year, so it's less portable, which you would think means more performance because there's more room for cooling, but there are lighter 18-inch gaming laptops that perform better in CPU-only workloads. But the extra space does mean that this is the only gaming laptop we tested all year that can fit 4 M.2 SSDs. Granted, 2 of them are the smaller 2230 size, while the other 2 are the bigger 2280. But still, 4 SSDs. No other gaming laptop is doing that right now. The closest is MSI's Titan 18, which supports 3 of the 2280 size. But yeah, apart from those things, there's nothing really too wrong with this laptop. If you want something with good gaming performance that isn't quite as expensive compared to other 18-inch models, and you don't mind the larger size and heavier weight, and you don't care too much about having a mini LED screen, then yeah, it's pretty decent. I think it's a solid B tier. And with all that in mind, up next we've got ASUS's Scar 18, which I think is at least ahead of the M18, so for now we'll start off in A tier. I rated last year's Scar 18 in A as well, and at the end of the day, not really too much has changed between 2023 and 2024. This year it's got slightly better performance due to the Intel 14th gen CPU, but of course an i9 14th gen chip is basically just a rebranded i9 13th gen chip. The main difference is 14th gen has slightly higher single core performance, so it can boost a little higher. But at the end of the day, FPS in games is going to be pretty comparable, especially at high resolutions like 1440p, where we're going to be limited by the same RTX 40 series graphics that we had last year. The main difference with this year's newer model is that it has an optional mini LED screen, so if that's something you care about, it certainly sets it ahead of the M18. Alright, up next we've got ASUS's TUF A14, which is the most recent gaming laptop that we've reviewed on the channel, as it's a fairly new release. Now, I think there could be a case for S tier for this one. ASUS's TUF series is meant to be their more budget-friendly option, but honestly, this thing is more like a slightly cut-down Zephyrus G14 than it is a budget gaming laptop, and the price reflects that. Compared to the Zephyrus G14, the TUF A14 actually has a newer Zen 5 processor, so it performs better in both single and multi-core performance, while also being cheaper. And the A14 also has an extra M.2 storage slot compared to the G14, so you can do more upgrades and fit more storage in this one. Unfortunately, a limit of AMD's Zen 5 processors at the moment is it can only be used with soldered memory, or on-package memory. Basically, there's no memory slots that you can put memory sticks in to upgrade. You're stuck with whatever you buy it with. I can definitely recommend the A14 as a 14-inch gaming laptop that you might want to consider, but it's just too expensive compared to the G14. Depending on sales, sometimes the A14 is only like $100 less than the G14. And I know the A14 has the better CPU performance and the extra SSD slot. Personally, I would just go for the G14 every time. But again, that's me. But yeah, based on it being overpriced and the fact that I basically just said I prefer the G14, I think I might have to bump this one down to A tier. And while we're on the topic of the G14, I might skip the TUF F16 just for now, and we'll go straight into the G14, just so we know if I put the A14 in the right spot. Alright, so last year I put the Zephyrus G14 in A tier, but the 2024 version has a lot of nice improvements, like the crisp OLED screen, the best speakers I've ever heard from a gaming laptop, and it's just smaller and lighter than most other options. Technically, the TUF A14 was slightly lighter than the G14, but it's extremely close, and I'd call that a draw. Now, of course, to make the G14 smaller and lighter this year, the trade-off is soldered memory, just like the A14. But at least you are able to buy it with 32 gigs of RAM, which honestly should be enough for gaming for years to come. Yeah, you spend more money up front compared to a different laptop that you might be able to upgrade down the line, but I still think having this option of buying more RAM up front significantly reduces the risk of this becoming e-waste anytime soon. Overall, it's just an excellent portable laptop that I can easily recommend. We've had the RTX 4060 version on sale on the gaminglaptop.deal site for as low as $10.99. So yeah, I think we've got our first S tier, as long as you prioritize getting it with 32 gigs of RAM and don't need any more than that. If you're someone that needs a beast of a workstation machine with more memory, then yeah, probably not the choice for you. Or if you need more upgrade options or SSD space. In that case, yeah, I could definitely see it being an F tier for you. But for me and this subjective list, I'm going to go with S S tier. Alright, now let's go back to that tough F16 that we kind of skipped over there. Overall, this was a good gaming laptop with decent build quality, and it was on the lighter side as far as 16-inch gaming laptops go, which is always a plus for me. Battery life was surprisingly good compared to other laptops with Intel HX processors. So not as good compared to AMD or Intel Media Lake options, but not terrible. The main problem is the F16 that I reviewed had a 2560 by 1600 resolution screen, but in the US market on Best Buy, for some reason it comes with a lower quality 1080p screen that's quite dim at just 250 nits, and that's not something I can recommend to anyone. Honestly, with that bad screen, I would put it in D tier. Not really something I think you should buy, but if we are considering the configuration that I actually reviewed, then I think B tier. There could be an argument for it to go into A tier, but I don't think it makes sense to put it above the Helios Neo 16, so it can chill out in B tier for now. Alright, next up we've got the ASUS Zephyrus G16, and this is basically the bigger brother of the G14 that I put in S tier, but as it's bigger, it also has higher end GPU options, so maybe S tier again? The G16 still has the G14's OLED screen, excellent speakers, and amazing battery life, but again, the memory cannot be upgraded, which apparently is just a limitation of the processors that ASUS are using, whether that be Intel's Media Lake or AMD's Zen 5. Both just make use of on-package memory. Now, the trade-off of having that soldered memory is this is the thinnest and lightest 16-inch gaming laptop I've ever tested. This thing feels super portable, and it's a gaming laptop I wouldn't mind traveling with. I just hate going on a big trip overseas or something and having so much of the weight in my backpack that I've got to carry around being a chunky laptop with a huge charger. But yeah, that's far less of a problem with the G16 compared to others. And unlike the smaller G14, you don't have to hunch over it as much to look at that smaller 14-inch screen. You get the biggest 16-inch panel. So far, the lowest price we've had the Zephyrus G16 with RTX 4070 graphics on the GamingLaptop.deal's website is $13.99, which I think is extremely competitive. I think it's quite reasonable for such a premium laptop. Though of course the full price is like $2,000 for the Intel model. But my biggest problem with the Intel version of the G16 is it only comes with 16 gigs of RAM with the RTX 4070 and below. You've got to spend hundreds of dollars more to get the RTX 4080 if you want 32 gigs of RAM. Or you've got to buy the AMD Zen 5 version, which does have a 4070 version with 32 gigs of RAM. But again, it costs hundreds of dollars more and just hasn't seen a good sale yet. So that's really not great. And based on that, if I were putting it in S tier, I think from that alone, it's enough to bump it down to A tier. Now look, I know the G14 has soldered memory that can't be upgraded as well, but at least you've got the option of buying the thing with 32 gigs of RAM with more GPU options instead of being forced to go for something way more expensive. I really don't like that. Now, in some regions, like here in Australia, that's not actually a problem. You can get the 4070 G16 with 32 gigs of RAM and the Intel CPU, so it seems to just vary by region. But yeah, that aside, it's an excellent laptop overall if you get it with 32 gigs of RAM. I guess to be fair, 16 gigs of RAM is still enough to run most games today. It's just that when you're spending this much money on a laptop that you're probably going to be using for years to come, it would be nice to have the safety of 32 gigs. And you have to buy that upfront as you can't upgrade it later. So ASUS need to at least give us that option. Alright, up next we've got the Dell XPS 14, and I know this thing isn't technically a gaming laptop, but hey, we covered it this year from the perspective of what a gamer might be looking for, so let's see where it fits. And honestly, in terms of the perspective from a gaming laptop, this thing kind of fails. There was just way too much of a focus on form over function. On the one hand, yeah, it is a really nice looking laptop, but on the other hand, an Apple MacBook Pro has more ports than it, and that kind of tells you everything you need to know. It's just way too expensive relative for the amount of performance on offer. You've got to spend $2,000 US to get this thing with RTX 4050 graphics. And not only that, they're power limited to just 45 watts, so most other 4050s will blow it away. You can even get the S-tier Zephyrus G14 with higher tier 4070 for less money than a 4050 XPS 14. Basically, there are just so many better 14-inch laptops out there that perform better than the XPS 14, even if you're not using it for gaming. Look, if you want an ultra-portable laptop and you might be playing games from time to time, yeah, it'll do the job. There are just much better options. So from a gamer's perspective, no one should be buying this thing, and it's going into F tier. Alright, next up is the Framework 16. Now, strictly speaking, this might not be a gaming laptop, but it does have discrete graphics inside and we can run games on it. And this was actually the only laptop we tested all year that had AMD's Radeon graphics inside. Those things are just becoming rarer and rarer. Now, the Framework 16 has an insane level of customization, upgradability, and repairability compared to pretty much any other laptop. And if those are things that you care about, then straight to S tier for sure. So far, there haven't been any new GPUs for it just yet. But to be fair, that's more down to AMD than it is Framework, because AMD just haven't announced any new laptop GPUs yet. Current rumors seem to suggest they'll be announcing the RX 8000 series, or RDNA 4, at CES in January. So just over a month from when this video goes live. And I'll be heading over to CES to check out all the new gaming laptops that have AMD graphics and Nvidia's RTX 50 series. So make sure that you're subscribed for that content. But in terms of the Framework 16, as a gaming laptop, it is extremely expensive. The Radeon 7700S graphics that I tested mine with perform similarly to Nvidia's RTX 4060. And in some games that prefer Radeon graphics, like Red Dead Redemption 2, they were more competitive with the 4070. There's just one small problem. You have to spend RTX 4080 money to get this laptop. That's $2,000 plus. And the 4080 is like 55% faster than the 4070 at 1440p. So in terms of raw gaming performance, any other 4080 gaming laptop is going to destroy this thing. So as far as it being a gaming laptop is concerned, I think I've got to go with C tier. It's a cool option and I really love what they're doing. It's going to be really awesome if they follow through with their promises, and in future you can take out the old GPU and install a new one in like 2 minutes. That's really cool, and it's not something anyone else is offering just yet. But yeah, for most people, that extra cost to get that, I don't think it's worth it. So let's go with a solid C for now. Up next, we've got Gigabyte's Aorus 16X. Now, just for some context, last year I put the Aorus 17X in B tier, and it had some significant improvements compared to what they did the year before. But now with this year's 16X, there are even more improvements. Like, all the keys on the keyboard and secondary functions finally get lit up. I've been asking for that for years. It's one of the best performing 16-inch gaming laptops in terms of raw CPU performance, only beaten by XMG's Neo 16, which, as we'll get to later, is a beast. It's got a decent screen, thermals are good under load, and gaming performance is where you would expect for its specs. Battery life is fairly average for an Intel HX laptop, but it completely failed my battery life test while running a game. Basically, games were just unplayable on battery. I don't think that's the end of the world though, because honestly, I don't recommend that most people actually run games on battery. You're just going to get better performance by having the charger connected, and you're not going to degrade the battery as fast by going through pointless recharge and discharge cycles all the time. They also tried to shove way too many pointless AI things into this machine. But that said, it is still a solid gaming laptop that I can easily recommend. There wasn't really anything else to complain about. So yeah, if I put Gigabyte's improved laptop last year in B tier, this one might be A tier. But it also feels wrong sitting next to the G16, which I think is a way better laptop. So relative to the options I've got here, I might go with B tier. But now in doing that, I kind of want to put the Helios Neo 16 up to A tier. I think I'll leave it for now. Things can be in the same tier for different reasons. We've also never actually listed the Aorus 16X on the US version of the GamingLaptop.deal's website, because it just hasn't had any good sales yet. And I think that's one of its problems. It's a decent gaming laptop, it just needs to come down in price. Alright, next up is Gigabyte's G6X, which is meant to be a more budget-friendly kind of option. Note that I said meant to be. Now, last year I gave Gigabyte's G5 an E, but the G6X does have some nice improvements over that, including faster ports, Type-C charging, a bigger battery, and a higher GPU power limit with a mux switch, which means better performance in games. But the screen kinda sucks with a slow 25 millisecond response time, which means even filthy casuals like myself will notice blurriness in fast-paced games. And color gamut is just 60% sRGB, so it looks kinda washed out. The build quality isn't great either. If you just open the lid normally, you can see the plastic start to flex. So who knows how long this thing's gonna last long term. And in the US, it's still a ripoff. Seriously, $1,300 US for an RTX 4060 in a budget chassis design is just outrageous. I don't even think I've said the word outrageous out loud until now. That's how outrageous it is. I mean, we've had higher tier laptops with RTX 4070 graphics for less money on the GamingLaptop.deal's website before. That kind of tells you all you need to know. And make no mistake, the features on offer from this gaming laptop are on the budget side. Now, that said, in some regions it is actually priced where it should be, and it's one of the cheaper options available. So in that case, sure, if it's your only option and you've got nothing else, then I guess you can go for it. But all things considered, I think I'm gonna go with D tier for this one. I won't shove it in E like last year because, as mentioned, it does have some nice nice improvements, but there's still a lot that I don't like. Okay, HP's Omen 14 next. Now, I had some high hopes for this gaming laptop at the start of the year. HP first told me about it before CES 2024, and at that time, they were saying it's going to be the lightest, most portable 14-inch gaming laptop. But that was before ASUS brought out their redesigned G14 at the same event. They really did beat HP to the punch. The Zephyrus G14 performs better in games because it's got a higher power limit. It also has an OLED screen, which is something the Omen 14 was promoting, and the G14 also ended up being thinner and lighter. The RTX 4070 graphics that was in my Omen 14 often got beaten by cheaper laptops with 4060 graphics, because the 4070 here was limited to just 60 watts, and that was due to it using Type-C as its only power source. So that means it maxes out with a 140 watt charger. There's just not enough power to give it more juice, which means less performance. And don't get me wrong, I love the idea of completely charging a laptop with Type-C only, but for a gaming laptop with RTX 4070 graphics, I don't think that's the best choice. At least not until 240 watt Type-C charging becomes more mainstream. Technically, the Omen does run quieter compared to the G14, but in my review of the G14, I showed that you could manually turn its fans down a bit, and it runs similarly to the Omen 14. In terms of fan noise, it still performs better. The Omen doesn't have a muck switch, but that's not the end of the world these days since the Microsoft Queso update. The Omen also has more screen wobble than I'd like, but yeah, at the end of the day, the main problem is just that lack of gaming performance for such an expensive laptop due to Type-C charging. Even without sales running, the G14 is always at least $100 cheaper, and it's just the better laptop in my opinion. And as I mentioned before, with sales, we've had the G14 with RTX 4060 as low as $1099 on the gaminglaptop.deal's website. I'm not actually sure about the prices the Omen 14 has dropped down to on sale because we don't even keep track of it. We just don't keep track of gaming laptops that we don't think that you should buy. So I don't have the data on that, but I have looked around and I haven't seen it get anywhere near as low compared to the G14. So there's absolutely no reason I would buy the Omen 14 over the G14. And that alone kind of makes me want to put it in E tier. It just doesn't make sense. And maybe I'm just a little disappointed because they told me all these good things about it, and then the G14 came out and just slammed it. So I admit I was expecting more out of it when it was first announced. And that was a bit disappointing. And look, I mean, it's not that bad of a laptop if we're looking at it in isolation. I mean, it works fine and there aren't major issues. Well, that 60 watt 4070 is a bit of an issue. But if other 14-inch laptops didn't exist and this thing was in its own bubble, sure, it's probably at least C tier. But I don't know, there's just no way I can recommend it. So I think we've got to compromise and go in between at D tier. Alright, next up is Lenovo's Legion 5. Honestly, this is probably the best mid-range 16-inch gaming laptop we tested all year. So I think we've got to go straight for S tier. Compared to other 16-inch laptops like the Aorus 16X, Tough F16, and Helios Neo 16, I definitely think it's ahead. So bare minimum, it's A tier. But I think we can make the case for S. I just didn't have anything to complain about with this laptop except the price. And that was at the time of review. It has had some nice sales since then, which of course have been featured on the gaminglaptop.deal's website. The Legion 5 was one of the better performing options compared to others that had the same specs. The build quality is nice, it's got a nice port layout, nice keyboard, plenty of customization in the BIOS, advanced Optimus and G-Sync, the screen is decent, thermals are okay, and battery life is above average for an Intel HX laptop. And performance while running on battery is still pretty good. But yeah, the main problem I had was the 2024 version just cost more compared to the 2023 version. But that has started to change over the last few weeks. Ultimately, I think this is an S-tier 16-inch gaming laptop. If it isn't, then I don't know what is. Except, of course, probably Lenovo's Legion 7i. I really like this laptop, as it's on the thinner side compared to a lot of other 16-inch laptops. It's not quite as thin compared to the Zephyrus G16, but the Legion 7i does have 2 slots of upgradable memory. I already did a full comparison between the Legion 7i and Zephyrus G16. The Legion being slightly thicker means that they've used a more powerful Intel HX processor, so there's just better single and multi-core CPU performance. But in games, it either performs about the same as the Zephyrus, or best case, about 10% faster. The bigger size and better performance does mean that the fans in the Legion 7 are a bit louder, but personally, the fans in the Zephyrus G16 were a bit more annoying to me as they sounded higher pitched. Unfortunately, the Legion does not have an OLED screen like the Zephyrus, but the screen that it does have still looks pretty good. The Zephyrus did have better battery life, but all things considered, I think the Legion is just a better option for me and most people compared to the G16. So I've got to go S tier. It's had some good sales too. Lowest price so far we've had it on the GamingLaptop.deal's website with RTX 4070 graphics was $1450. So $50 more expensive compared to the G16. But of course, I am filming this video a week before Black Friday sales. We'll be adding new sales every few hours to the GamingLaptop.deal's website, so make sure that you check it out regularly so that you don't miss anything. Alright, let's get into the remaining laptops, starting with Lenovo's LOQ 15. Now, last year I put Lenovo's LOQ as an S tier as far as budget-friendly gaming laptops go. And this year, the LOQ has only gotten better. Of course, assuming we're not talking about Lenovo's new LOQ Essential, or Essentials, or something. Basically, in the last few weeks, Lenovo put out a new version of the LOQ, and I think they call it LOQ Essentials. And it seems like they cut it down a fair bit compared to the LOQ that I originally reviewed this year. The new Essentials version has a smaller battery, a lower GPU power limit, and only one stick of memory for upgrades instead of two. It almost seems like an entirely different laptop, but they're still calling it a LOQ. That's not what we're talking about here. Now, a few hours before I sat down to film this video, I did actually buy that cheaper LOQ Essentials. So we will have a comparison video coming to see how it stacks up against the normal LOQ. But just to be clear, the LOQ I have in this ranking video is not that cheaper Essential version. That would probably rank much lower based on the things that they've taken away from it. Alright, so that aside, the original LOQ 15 is still my favorite budget-friendly gaming laptop of 2024. I just prefer it over things like Acer's Nitro or HP's Victus series. And I guess there's also Gigabyte's G series and MSI's GF6 but those are so far lower in tier that I don't even consider them. The LOQ just has more features than all those other laptops, while often being a similar price, if not the lowest price that we have on the GamingLaptop.deal site. The new cooling design this year removed the air exhaust vents on the side of the laptop, so no hot air blowing on your mouse hand. There were a lot of people asking me about motherboard issues on the LOQ this year. I only have 4 of them, so I'm not a good sample size, but I didn't have any issues, and I did reach out to Lenovo, who claimed that they aren't seeing an increase in warranty or RMA requests over any of their other products. Honestly, considering out of all the gaming laptops we sold this year, 55% of them were Lenovo, and obviously the budget-friendly LOQ is going to be quite popular, I think it might just be a case that it's a very popular gaming laptop. No laptop is perfect, and there's always going to be failure rates. That's literally why warranty exists. But my point is, if a lot of people have access to this laptop, it's going to make a rare issue appear more common, as there's going to be more people overall talking about it. Personally, I don't think it's a big deal or something to really worry about. Again, there is warranty, and I've even seen some people online claiming that the issue has been fixed. But yeah, I've just got no real idea because I've never actually come across anyone that's had the problem. I always just see people repeating the same thing, like, what about LOQ motherboard issues? Like, it's just something that started out at some point, and then people have just been questioning it for months and months and months, and it just snowballs into this big thing. I don't know, maybe a lot of people did have problems with it, but that just isn't the impression that I've gotten. It just seems to be people asking about a few people who did have problems. Now, in the last few months, Lenovo did start making cheaper versions of this LOQ 15, not talking about the Essentials one. They started using AMD Ryzen processors without integrated graphics, so either the 7235HS or 7435HS. At the end of the day, performance with those CPUs is still fine as long as you've got the charger connected, but yeah, if you are someone that needs battery life, you'll want to avoid the LOQ with those processors. I also wouldn't recommend the LOQ with the Intel Arc A530M graphics. For some reason, in a lot of countries, it costs more than the Nvidia RTX 4050 one. But as I've shown in a dedicated video, the Intel Arc graphics performs much worse, especially when talking about 1% low performance, which is just a fancy way of showing the dips in performance. So yeah, I suppose with the option of CPUs that don't have integrated graphics and that Intel Arc model, maybe we could bump it down to A tier. I suppose even if we factor in that maybe there is an issue with the motherboards, it feels a bit like speculation though. I don't know. I think with that in mind, we'll go with A tier for now. But even so, it's still the best budget gaming laptop I've tested in the last couple of years. So I guess if we're talking strictly budget-friendly gaming laptops, then yeah, it's still S tier. Alright, up next is MSI's Cyborg 14. And this was only one of 2 gaming laptops we reviewed from MSI this year. I actually had to buy this one with my own money. MSI only sent us the Titan 18. I did try to get others like the Stealth 16 and Raider 18, but MSI just never sent them. And now it's too late, so maybe next year with RTX 50 series. Alright, compared to other 14-inch laptops like the Omen 14, I think this has at least got to be ahead of that. Technically, the Omen is a better overall laptop if we're talking about things like build quality and features.
But hear me out.
The Cyborg 14 is one of the lightest 14-inch gaming laptops, which is probably in part because it's all plastic. It's only beaten by more expensive options like the ASUS TUF A14 or ASUS Zephyrus G14, both of which cost hundreds of dollars more. The Cyborg 14 is a bit chunky with that lower quality plastic build, at least compared to the ASUS options and HP Omen 14, but because it's a bit thicker, it's also the only 14-inch gaming laptop that I know of that has an Ethernet port, and I know some of you really care about that. And unlike the G14, A14, and Omen 14, the Cyborg 14 has 2 upgradable memory slots. It is missing premium features though, like Type-C charging, MUX switch, and G-Sync, and at around $1,100, it hasn't really lowered in price compared to when I reviewed it months ago. And that just seems to be the case with a lot of MSI laptops actually. For some reason, they just seem a lot more expensive compared to the competitors, which might be the reason why only 2% of you bought MSI gaming laptops this year. And out of the MSI laptops that we did sell through those links below our videos, no one even bought the Cyborg 14. So I don't know, I guess I wasted my time reviewing it. Well, not really. A lot of you probably didn't buy it because of the review. But yeah, the main problem is Cyborg 14, too expensive. I think it's been like $1,100, which is the same price we've had a G14 on the gaminglaptop.deal site with 4060. And the G14 is just way better. Granted, you can't upgrade its memory. I know some of you don't like the Cyborg 14's one fan cooler, but thermals were still okay. Granted, that's probably because it has lower power limits, so it doesn't perform quite as well. But to increase the power limits, they would also need to pair it with the bigger charger, which would increase costs and need a bigger cooler, and then it would get heavier, and so on and so on. But yeah, the 4050 version I bought runs at 45 watts, so other cheaper 4050 laptops will outperform this thing in games. Like HP's Victus, for example, which gets 25% higher FPS in Cyberpunk despite having the same GPU. At the end of the day for gaming though, it's not really a gaming laptop that I would recommend, especially when it's so overpriced. But considering the price difference compared to the Omen 14, if you really want a 14-inch gaming laptop for as cheap as possible, I think there's at least got to be the case for C tier. I don't know, it kind of feels weird to put it next to the Alienware and Framework. Obviously those are better laptops. Again, things are in different tiers for different reasons. I'm kind of considering this from the perspective compared to other 14-inch gaming laptops, I suppose. And yeah, this is a more budget option, but obviously that means it's got other constraints. And again, obviously the Omen is a better laptop, but this makes more sense to me. I could see myself at least possibly recommending the Cyborg, whereas I can never see myself recommending the Omen over the G14. I like what MSI are at least trying to do here, maybe. Like, there just aren't really any budget-friendly 14-inch gaming laptops. If you want a smaller 14-inch laptop, you've got to fork out that cash and get a premium option. I was kind of hoping that would change with ASUS's TUF A14, but as mentioned, that's kind of just a cut-down version of the G14. It's still quite expensive, and as a result, it has a lot of nice features, and it's a great laptop. But yeah, Cyborg 14, definitely a more budget option out of the 14-inch options. Would have been nicer if it was a bit cheaper, but at the same time, I kind of appreciate that we've got an option that costs a bit less money for those that do want a 14-inch laptop. Alright, next up is MSI's Titan 18. Now, this laptop is massive. It's a huge 18-inch model, but that said, Alienware's M18R2 was actually heavier. The Titan 18 is the only laptop we tested this year with 4 memory slots, which means it can go up to 192 gigs of memory. The compromise is you have to run it at lower speeds to get that much capacity, but it is an option if you need it. And it's also got 3 M.2 slots for storage, one of which is PCIe Gen 5, a rare feature that pretty much no other gaming laptop offers at this time. The problem, of course, price. This thing is insanely expensive. It only recently went below $5,000 for the RTX 4090 model, which is like double the price of a Lenovo Legion Pro 7 with same graphics. And that will ultimately perform quite similarly in games, for 50% less money. So with the Titan, you're not paying for the performance. I think you're paying for the insane level of upgradability and the crazy level of customization that's available through the BIOS. This thing is perfect for tuners and enthusiasts. I didn't like using the touchpad on this laptop. For some reason, it lacks Advanced Optimus, which feels kind of embarrassing for MSI's top-end product, given we have budget gaming laptops with that feature now. And of course, battery life is terrible. But that's pretty much the case from any powerful 18-inch laptop I've ever tested. And as mentioned, it weighs quite a lot. You can probably skip gym day if you're carrying this thing around. But if you're using it as a desktop replacement and maybe not actually moving it around all that much, that's probably not that big of a deal. For me personally, I can't put it above B tier, which is one ranking above the C tier that I gave last year's Titan. The Titan is better this year, but not that much better to bump it up to A. I mean, if we're strictly speaking about whether or not I would personally buy the this laptop? The answer is no, so I would put it in E or F. I just don't want something that big, and I don't need that much upgradability, especially for double the price of another maxed out laptop from another brand. But for those of you made of money who might want those things, and the option of up to 192 gigs of RAM, then yeah, the Titan 18 is B tier. Alright, Razer's Blade 16 is up next. Now, last year, I gave the Blade 16 a C, and this year, as with many other laptops, it has a new 14th gen processor, so basically the exact same as 13th gen, just better single-core performance. They also bumped it up to Wi-Fi 7 this year, and it also has an OLED screen option now, which is very nice. So based on those small improvements, mainly the OLED screen, I think from last year's C, I've got to bump it up to at least B. Of course, it is still super expensive and not for everyone. That's just the Razer way. But the build quality does feel super premium. It's one of the only all-metal solid CNC laptops that you can get. Out of gaming laptops, of course. Basically, think of it like a Windows MacBook for gaming, in terms of how it feels. At the end of the day, like the Titan 18, I would pick something for like $1,000 or $2,000 less that's still gonna perform the same and have more or less the same features. Like, say, the Zephyrus G16 or Legion 7i. So yeah, I think we'll go in B tier because it's better than last year, but also, like the Titan, it's just way too expensive for most people. And both laptops have pretty much never had sales. We've never listed either on the US version of the gaminglaptop.deal's website, for example. Like when a Blade 16 goes on sale, it goes down like $300, but when it's a $4,300 product, that doesn't even look like a sale. It's still a $4,000 machine. Come on. Alright, next up is Razer's Blade 18, which is basically a bigger version of the Blade 16. And last year, I put the Blade 18 in B tier, and there just aren't that many improvements with this year's Blade 18. Again, we get the 14th gen CPU, basically a 13th gen rebrand. It is the first gaming laptop with Thunderbolt 5 though, which would be interesting, but there still aren't any eGPU enclosures that actually support Thunderbolt 5 yet, so I haven't been able to test it. It's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, I guess. It also got upgraded to Wi-Fi 7, and it now has a mini LED screen option, which was not available last year. And I mean, it looks nice, but cheaper options like ASUS's Scar 18's mini LED get brighter. And yeah, a maxed out Scar with the mini LED costs at least $500 less than the Blade 18. To me, the appeal of a Razer laptop is that slick all-metal design. But at 18 inches, this thing just feels like a huge metal brick. I don't know, for me personally, at 18 inches, I'd go for the Scar 18. So with that above it in A tier, I think it makes sense to leave this in B tier like last year, despite the fact that it has a mini LED option this year. Alright, last but not least is XMG's Neo 16, which is also known as the Eluktronics Hydroc 16 in the US market sold by Eluktronics. But XMG sell it in Europe from Germany. Now last year, I gave this laptop a D, but it's had some significant improvements this year. It's got better build quality, way less screen wobble, a brighter screen that bends further back, Type-C charging, a smaller GAN charger, a camera privacy shutter, and a bigger touchpad. All nice improvements. It is still on the more expensive side, but you've got to pay more to get the best. This laptop has optional liquid cooling, which takes it to the next level. With last year's model, the pipe for water cooling only went over the GPU. Now this year, it goes over both the CPU and GPU, while also being closer to the CPU and GPU dies, which results in better thermals and better performance. And with the liquid cooler, you've got the option of turning the fans down and just getting a much quieter laptop while still getting killer performance. Of course, the liquid cooler is completely optional. Even when running this laptop on air cooling, it often beats bigger 18-inch gaming laptops that we've tested. Seriously impressive stuff. At the end of the day, in games, it doesn't really perform any better compared to other laptops with the same graphics, because we're just limited by what Nvidia is able to do at this point. So if you're just gaming, you can definitely get something else that will give you about the same performance in games, and likely for much less money. But if you're also using it for other tasks too, then this does offer extreme levels of performance. Honestly, I'm kind of looking at A tier based on all those improvements. Apart from the high price tag, the main reasons keeping me from putting it in S tier is just that it would be nice for such an expensive high-end laptop to have either an OLED screen or mini LED screen option. Kind of feels like a bit of a missed opportunity when this is just meant to be that maxed out all-round best laptop. And for some reason, the USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports are slower Gen 1 rather than Gen 2. Not really a big deal, but just another small thing that kind of adds up to this not being the laptop that does it all. So yeah, let's go with A tier. Alright, so those are my laptop rankings. Of course, feel free to disagree with me down in the comments. But if you do, just know that you're wrong. Obviously, I'm joking. If there was something you would have done differently, please let me know in the comments. Now, there are plenty of gaming laptops that I didn't review in 2024, because they were basically the same as the 2023 version, so it would just be a waste of time. Like Lenovo's Legion Pro 7i, for example. I still think that's a great gaming laptop, but I didn't get it this year because it's basically the same as last year. Just the 2023 version has the 13th gen CPU, while 2024 has the 14th gen CPU, which, as mentioned throughout this video, is basically just a rename with a slightly higher single core boost. It's not enough of a change to justify 2 weeks of testing and a 20-minute video. So check out my ranking video from last year to see how all of those other models stack up. Or if you're not sure which gaming laptop is right for you, then check out this one next, where I go through what gaming laptop I would buy at every price range. I'll see you in one of those next.